So spotlight on the LDCs. As you know, LDCs are a category of countries that are classified by the United Nations based on their gross national income, of course the low level of gross national income, low level of human assets index, which measures the education and health outcomes, and the high level of economic and environmental vulnerabilities. So altogether 44 countries, 1 billion population, that makes like 13% of the world's total population, but they contribute to the world's GDP merely 1.3%. There are lots of challenges that this group of countries face, maybe to just name a few. Extreme poverty, like 380 million people in these countries still live in the extreme poverty. And the challenge is that those numbers of absolute numbers of people in extreme poverty increase. If you look at the numbers from 2019 to 2023, there has been around 20 million more people moving into that category of people living in extreme poverty. And then, of course, number of other challenges that can be listed. I will not try to list them all, but access challenges in accessing the basic services, access to electricity. Just about 500 million people in that continent lives without access to electricity. Only a third of the population has access to internet services, and many, many more challenges. So altogether, under this backdrop, the investment needs that have been assessed is $300 billion annually to be enough for these countries to achieve the sustainable development goals. Governments struggle. More than half of the governments are experiencing debt distress, or are already in debt distress actually. And the borrowing capacity, as you might know, that these countries borrow at a rate of capital that is twice as much as the ones for the developed countries. If you look at the private sector, the SMEs are the backbone of their economies, but only 16–70% on average the SMEs have access to capital. So all of this to just say that the challenges are many. Capital needs to flow there. Capital is not flowing because if you look at the blended finance transactions, only mere 6% of those kinds of transactions go to the LDCs. And 32 out of the 44 of the LDCs are in African continent, which again means this spotlight and those numbers that we just saw are clearly not enough, that all of us together have to do more. Now, what are the challenges if you ask that question, and if one is to generalize? Fundamentally, it's a mismatch between the credit risk rating of those countries, sovereign credit risk ratings. As you know, many of them have ratings of BBB and below, and many of them don't even have credit ratings. And the credit risk appetite, investing appetite of the institutional investors, the MDBs, the FIs, private investors, etc. There is a fundamental mismatch, which, as we all know, because in this room we represent that community, hinders the capital flows from investors to these recipients and borrowers. What the UNCDF does, this is an organization that is now 60 years old. It's the United Nations Capital Development Fund. Tom spoke earlier about the United Nations Development Fund. This is a sister organization that has both the development mandate as well as capital mandate. The one that literally this year in FFD4 was amplified by the member states, inviting the UNCDF to play a more active role in leveraging concessional, catalytic, first loss capital, especially in early stages, with a view of crowding in larger volumes of private capital and from the MDBs, DFIs, IFIs, and other private investors. So what UNCDF does is we invest via different set of investment instruments, from investment grants, concessional loans, portfolio or single loan guarantees, other types of blended investment instruments, again with a focus on Africa. I have a few interesting examples that I would like to share with you, but before I go there, I would like to invite also my panelists also, Victoria, to share about their experiences, because we are a self-moderated group, as you see. Victoria, over to you to share your experiences, please.
Thank you, Karén. I think you've done a great job setting this scene. I'm here to speak about the work of the Africa Enterprise Challenge Fund. We were set up 17 years ago as a small project, very specifically from the agency to solve for Africa's grand development challenges through mobilizing private sector capital. At the time, the Tony Blair Commission for Africa initiative was thinking about aid just not being sufficient, and think about it that it's the very same thing that we would say today, that aid is not enough and we need to use public and philanthropic capital to mobilize as much private capital as is possible to solve for Africa's development challenges. We work across 26 countries. 50% of our portfolio, and portfolio here I mean Africa's SMEs, is in LDCs. You will find us in Burkina Faso, you will find us in Tanzania, you will find us in Somalia, you'll find us in Sudan and South Sudan. The most difficult of places to go. And I understand why commercial capital cannot go there. I wouldn't put my money in such places. Walk with me from Hargeisa in Somaliland. You drive for 250 kilometers on a tarmac road, and subsequent to that, you drive for 2 hours on a 20-kilometer route to access a community that is so vibrant because they have local resources that had actually been unlocked through an investment in a mini-grid in their village, a value of 700,000 catalytic capital and a $2 million investment from private investors. But yet that 2 million would not at all have come into this project in the absence of 700, taking on the early market risk and project risk. Out of that, 1,000 households get to access electricity, but most importantly, 425 small and micro businesses get to increase their income by up to 200%. You would not even think that over the rainy season, this village is completely cut off from accessing the capital city, Hargeisa, of the nearby port of Berbera. There are great possibilities that can be created if we choose to intentionally use public capital and philanthropic capital for the right purpose, pushing private sector benefits, products, and services to communities that really are deserving, and we shouldn't leave them behind. Most of us here are very privileged, and I mean 100% of us. We never have it all to think about our child will not go to school. We never have to think about I won't have electricity. We don't have to think about I won't have the next meal. But that is a story of majority of rural households in LDCs. But we've seen the power having deployed so far, generally just totally, almost $270 million, mobilized $925 million in private capital. We worked with 2 commercial banks, just as an example, before I turn it back to Karén, in Somalia, to extend their portfolio to the productive sector, a portfolio that they had never, worked with before because it's a very risky customer segment. Fisheries, camel value chain, tomato value chain, provided them with 2 million euro. They went on to put their own equivalent of 10 million euro in a portfolio that was very fresh. But it took a lot of work on technical assistance and working with them around building a healthy portfolio of these small and micro businesses that are working in these value chains. Now they are sustaining that portfolio, this extended customer segment whose profile is 78% first-time borrowers on the basis of their own capital, as well as shareholder capital as well as private capital. That really is a power. of using capital that comes from public places and philanthropic funders to be able to unlock the floor into the sectors that we care for to enhance economic opportunity for rural people. That's better use of money, and I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Yeah, I just when Victoria was speaking, I just recalled about a few points that I would like also to share with you. One is related to the session we just had today about the ODA and the shrinking ODA, which essentially means that any ODA that still is there, and OECD will essentially give some statistics that 2/3 of the ODA directly goes from the providers to the recipient countries and the governments. 1/3 flows via the different schemes, primarily the United Nations and other international organizations, intergovernmental organizations that serve that conduit. It essentially means that any ODA that is still there, out there, needs to be used in the most catalytic, in a form of to create additionality and concessionality so that, again, it can leverage more capital. Essentially, that's what the UNCDF does. We are funded by ODA, by other philanthropic kind of capital, and any money that we spend in the form of concessional loan, guarantee, or different kinds of investment instruments, we always look at those aspects. It has to be additional, meaning that if we do not take part in the transaction, that transaction will not happen. So that's the additionality we create. And then concessionality is that always sub-market prices, so that long-term tenor, sub-market rates, so that, again, it can be more accessible to the borrowers or participants of the project. A few examples. In Tanzania, we helped the Tanzanian Municipal Water and Sanitation Authority to issue a bond, a green bond, essentially to fund the clean water project. It's about $21 million. The first ever green bond that has been issued in Tanzania, and that was essentially fully subscribed. It was oversubscribed, and 65% from the local investors, domestic resource mobilization, and 35% from the foreign investors. Essentially, that bond was also cross-listed both in Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange as well as cross-listed in Luxembourg. So quite a positive example that shows that with intentional and innovative way of designing things, you can certainly mobilize domestic capital as well as foreign capital. And then there are a number of other transactions where we have participated again as a guarantee provider. A lot was already discussed by Jewel and other colleagues about the effectiveness of the guarantees. That can really demonstrate sometimes the perceived and sometimes even misperceived risk that is out there in conversations. Because we have quite a few examples, both from Africa as well as other countries, where we have been able to prove after the guarantee to show that the actual losses are significantly lower than what they were initially perceived. We have a few last second remaining for our panel. We are asked to finish early, but I will leave maybe last closing words to you, Victoria.
For everyone who is thinking about supporting the LDCs, I'll just say two things. We keep talking about bankability, but there is no way we will find bankable projects if we are not willing to do the hard work of rolling up the sleeves. And it means really venture building, walking the journey with the businesses. They don't have the advantage of Harvard and Stanford backgrounds if they are in the LDCs and locally led, right? They are working with what they know, but then they are really brilliant and they come with that local capital. They know the networks, they know their communities, they know the opportunity. But work with them now to be able to build proper businesses that meet the appetite of the investor. So technical advisory support, investment readiness, investment facilitation is going to be very useful. Number two is building the local capital markets. If we are able to get the local capital markets to be able to work, mobilize as much local capital as is possible, and see that the local ecosystem is strong enough to support its SMEs for growth, we will definitely move the needle. Thank you.